So I'm ready, Dan, to be impressed. We're told that you trekked to the North Pole. Dan's been nominated, however, by the Boat Club, and it seems to me that after a lively evening in the Boat Club dinner, many undergraduates are found almost halfway to the North or South Pole the following morning, not only unprepared, but many of them stark naked. So, Dan, I'm willing to be impressed, but impress me.
So rattle through this a little bit. There's quite a lot to try and cover. What were we doing? And this is quite an important point, because you'll probably read a lot about folks going to the North Pole or the South Pole or other cold places. That can mean a multitude of different things. So we were going to the Geographic North Pole, which is the blue dot in the middle there, kind of the top of the world is the way we like to think of it. There are lots of other North Poles, which different definitions, as you can see. Most people go to the magnetic North Pole because it's very near land, actually. So I wouldn't want to say easy to get to, but it's relatively straightforward. And if you want to sort of tick off a North Pole, I'd definitely recommend that one as being the simplest to get to. We wanted to do a slightly more difficult one, so we went to the blue one, which is generally regarded among sort of adventurers. That's kind of the one you go for. It's the one if you go back and read the books around what Nansen and Scott around that kind of time were doing. Generally, they were trying to get to the geographic North Pole was their goal. So how were we doing it? Because this day and age, you can just fly there as well. If you really want to be at the geographic North Pole, there are now companies, or one company at least, that will put you on a plane and land you on the ice, assuming the ice is thick enough. So we didn't want to do that. We didn't have the money to do that, to be fair. And we didn't see that there was much challenge in that either. So what was it we were doing that maybe made things a little more difficult? Well, there were just two of us. It was me and my wife, who's with me here today, and hopefully some of you will get to meet her as well later on. As I said, going from Canada to the North Pole, for what it's worth, is generally regarded as being a little bit more difficult as some of the other routes. But the most important point here is no support or assistance, which will mean nothing to, I imagine, any of you. But that's the point about not flying there, not using skidoos, not using dogs, not having someone give you resupplies every 2 weeks, which you can do. All these things are possible, and they all generally make your life that little bit easier when you're on the ice. So the sort of holy grail, as it were, is to try and get to the North Pole from land, Canada, Russia, Greenland, Svalbard, wherever you want to start, get there, but from under your own steam, without any help. And that's the top right over there. Only 46 people have done that ever. All of those have done in the last 20 years. Not to say people haven't been trying to do it for a lot longer than that, and there are many fantastic books you can read about truly sort of heroic exploits of folks trying to achieve that. But really, it just wasn't necessarily possible. And certainly most people don't believe it was possible until relatively recently. The other thing we realized when we were doing this is a lot of people didn't think we had a chance, and a significant part of that was Sir Ranulph Fiennes, who I'm sure you're all well aware of. He tried at least three times, to do the same trip that we did, and for his efforts, he lost a thumb and a finger, but never made it to the pole, despite being well equipped and obviously a very experienced chap. So it wasn't an easy thing to set out to do, and obviously a lot of the folks we spoke to felt we were kind of taking the mick a little bit by even trying. And why were we taking the mick? Well, we had no background in this at all. We both had full-time jobs. My wife's a doctor. I worked in the city then. I still do. But I'd done rowing at college. My wife had done rowing at college. We both enjoyed the outdoors, going for a walk around, the Peak District. But going to the North Pole wasn't really near what we'd done before. And I think there was a definite sense of people within that sort of world when we spoke to them. They felt we should. They felt there was a progression you should go through of trips you should do to get yourself into a position to try something like this. And let's be clear, we did an awful lot of training, did 2 years of training for this. But still, we were relatively inexperienced for what we were trying to do. And definitely our attempt was fraught with uncertainty about the success. And why is it difficult then getting to the North Pole? The obvious one you're probably all thinking is it's really, really cold. That's actually, it is a problem, and it changes the way you behave, it changes what you do. Very much people talk about having very good cold weather routines, and those are critical if you're going to survive anywhere like that. Temperature was at the start -50, -60 centigrade. Your household freezer is about -20. When we finished, it was about -20. So we gradually got warmer because you start at the end of winter and you walk into spring. So it really is desperately cold. But the reality is, if you can't cope with the cold, you'll fail on day 1 or day 2. That'll be found out very, very quickly. Indeed, you'll get frostbite within the first few hours, and you'll have to call for an evacuation. So, interestingly, with this trip, the first thing we learned was actually the cold wasn't the real problem. You learn to manage that. The real problem is the fact that you're going 500 miles over horrendous terrain, for want of a better phrase, and you're having to take everything with you, because we were going, as I mentioned at the start, without help. So everything means about 300 kilos of food, fuel, and equipment for 2 people over a 2-month trip. 300 kilos is a lot. It's 4 times what I weigh, and between us, it meant we were both having to haul roughly double our body weights at the start, which in of itself is very difficult, even if you were going on very easy terrain. But the North Pole, as I said, it's not the cold, it's the terrain. You get pressure ridges. There'll be a few photos in a second. You get open water, which you have to swim across, which is miserable. You get whiteouts where you can't see a thing because everything is white. There is nothing that isn't white in the North Pole on the grounds, and if it happens to be cloudy, that means everything is white, and you really cannot see anything. Polar bears is one issue. We didn't have problems with them, but you have to carry a gun just in case. And other things which I'll talk about a little bit at the end, is things around motivation, actually, because it is a long time to be incredibly isolated, even with the 2 of us who knew each other very well. It's a very unusual situation to find yourself in. You don't have the normal sort of support or safety network that you would have in day-to-day life, your friends, your family. You can never sit on the couch and flick on the TV or just have a hot drink when you feel like it. Those things aren't available. And actually that was the hardest part for us, was just kind of keeping on going, because it really was very, very difficult mentally to do that. Other things, there's the 300 kilos obviously sounds a lot. We were very skimpy on the amount of food we took. I mean, you unquestionably rely on the fact you're going to lose a hell of a lot of weight on this trip. We lost about 10 kilos each. Trying to carry enough food to not lose weight wouldn't work. You just can't carry that amount. So at the start, when we were preparing and measuring out very, very carefully everything, we made a very conscious decision around how much weight we felt we could lose, i.e. how little food we could bring. You don't get enough sleep because you spend every waking hour trying to progress towards the pole. So we were getting about 4 hours sleep for most of the 2 months, which was really insufficient given the amount of work we were doing. But if you want to lie in, you're never going to get there. So you just have to get up and start walking. It's all about walking. And I guess I covered a little bit those points at the bottom there. So to put some of that in context, this is a pressure ridge. So this is, you may see on the screens, this is crushed ice. So when the ice freezes, you get these big, lovely flat sheets, which are really good for walking on. The problem is then the combination of wind and tides crunches those sheets up into these big blocks of ice, which are massive. And so we would be having to haul our 300 kilos over these, because these run for miles and miles and miles and miles. You can't go around them. Sometimes you can, but you generally can't. So you get to one of these things, deeply, deeply disappointing. You can see them obviously a long way in the distance as you're walking. So your heart immediately sinks, and half an hour later you get there, look around in case there's a slightly lower bit, and then you get to hard work of unclipping yourself from your sleds and manhandling these massive weights over that, which you could take easily 45 minutes an hour getting over something like that, which is why time is against you, because if you're walking at a mile an hour on the best of times, then you lose an hour going about 20 yards. Things don't work so well. This is a genuine photo, and it's not that I'm crap at taking photos. This is actually what it's like, and the horizon's probably about here. And it's just, when the cloud comes in, it's thick enough that the sun is genuinely obscured, so you don't have any shadow. You can't see anything at all, and you would walk along, and you would just walk into a snowdrift. There'd be a snowdrift waist high, and suddenly you'd be flat on your face, having not seen anything, which is, again, very frustrating, slows you down, and just generally creates tensions between us. The other bit this creates as well is it's quite hard to navigate when it's like this, just in terms of trying to go in a straight line. It's very difficult, and we were all about going in a straight line if we could, for obvious reasons. So there were funny little challenges which you may not think about, but as I said, it's not the cold, it's all these day-to-day things which are real problems. This is swimming, which is a very short video clip. So if you see it, this is Amelia. She's in an immersion suit. The opening's up here, so you can't lie down and swim normally because water would gush in the front. So you're kind of standing up in the water, floating obviously, with your sleds behind you, just one sled at this point, making incredibly slow progress. It's obviously not a great environment. You inevitably do get water down the front just because you can't cover any distance, as you can imagine, without a little bit of splashing. And then you get to the other end, get out, you're now wet, the temperature's minus 40, so that freezes in about 15 seconds. And you're now solid up here, knowing that at some point during the day that will probably melt at night in your sleeping bag. So these are the sorts of things which slow you down and make the journey less fun than it would otherwise be. So kind of, why were we successful? And this is really the point I wanted to talk about a little bit around, why do two people with no background in this, how do we get on there and get on with it and make it work when other folks like Sir Fiennes didn't make that happen? We were lucky in that at the start things went well for us, I think partly because of our preparation. And we were super enthusiastic. Even all those swimming bits and the pressure ridges, we loved all that. It was new, it was exciting. We never encountered anything like that before in our lives. And so just even the difficult bits were great. They're really good fun. And then actually what caused us the problem and where we really hit challenge was after a few weeks, we were doing better than we expected in terms of distance traveled. And we sort of thought, well, this is all right. We've got this licked, haven't we? We just looked at how fast we were going, and you do the maths, and well, that's distance we've got left to go. Well, we're going to get to the pole, so great. We just have to do another 5 weeks of this, and we'll be there. And that was a catastrophic sort of change in mental attitude to the trip, where that sort of, I wouldn't say complacency actually set in, but that sort of easing off the gas and just resetting the way we approached the trip was a real problem, because the next week we had, week 4, we had negative drift. You can't show a photo of negative drift, really, but it's where the wind blows against you, and you're on a sheet of ice that's, hundreds of miles across, maybe. It still moves, and it's moving back to Canada the way we've come. So you would wake up, you'd notice it more at night, because obviously we'd check the GPS in the evening and check it in the morning, and in the morning you were back where you were the yesterday morning, which is awful. And it was that which really, we had a terrible week of that, where we were killing ourselves to go forwards, and just every day we were just drifting back. Very, very difficult to kind of keep the right mental approach. So or hopefully part of the reason we were successful with that, we had done before we went, not just a lot of physical training, which obviously you have to do, an awful lot of gym work, a lot of work outside, but a lot of mental training as well around how we interact together with our personalities. We have some ways very similar. We're both quite sciencey, but in other ways quite different. I'm less emotive. My wife is more emotive, and that can create tensions in stressful situations. We did a lot of scenario planning as well, trying to, as much as you could, anticipate what could happen, and put in place sort of contingency plans to try and help yourself through those. Whilst they're never adequate, the act of planning is always helpful when you come to those situations. So we did a lot of this, and this really helped us. The fact that we made the environment the enemy, that was really important. We were friends, and we were both united against sort of the world, as it were, the world at large. And it just gives you something to pull together when things are difficult. So I think a lot of that is hopefully already covered, as I'm about to run out of time. And the main thing that really worked for us was a lot of preparation. We never gave up. I don't mean that on the trip. You don't give up when you're out there, but we never gave up during the 2 years of prep beforehand, when it would have been easy to do so, and just trying to believe in ourselves. And the final thing, so that's the aim of the game, is to get to 90 degrees north, which we did. And for those of you who know about GPS system, interestingly, we were going at 55 knots at that point in time, which I'm not sure was right, but we were definitely at the North Pole.
Dan, I am impressed. The bit I've always wanted to be Jeremy Paxman. I'm not allowed to ask questions today, but my Jeremy Paxman bit, I think the little phrase you used, there were tensions between us, is the one I would like to pull away at in the questioning. I believe, I've heard, that relationships have ended between people who are trying to get from Cambridge to North London. And these two got married after they'd got to the North Pole. That really does need some explanation. But anyway, not for now. Thank you very much, Dan.